At LSI, we don't just follow trends, we help shape the future. Welcome to Behind the Win, the podcast where we break down the biggest moves in tech, innovation, leadership, and government contracting. Here at LSI, we're bringing you exclusive conversations with the minds behind groundbreaking advancements, disruptive strategies, and industry-defining wins. From retail to tech, defense to government solutions. This is where you get the insights to stay ahead. Let's go behind the win.
Welcome to Behind the Win, where we dive into the stories and strategies behind game-changing leadership. Today's guest is Val Hale, former athletic director at BYU and the former executive director of the Utah Governor's Office of Economic Development. We'll explore how Val built a winning culture in college athletics, mastered the business of sports, and helped shape Utah's economic growth story. Val, thanks. We're excited to have you here on the podcast. We're going to jump right in. During your time at BYU Athletic Director, you led Cougar Athletics to numerous championships and elevated its national profile. What were the core principles you focused on to foster a championship mindset across that department?
Well, first of all, you have to realize BYU is a private institution, a religious institution. So everything we did was underpinned by, the values, the principles of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which operates BYU.
Yep.
We were one of, I think, two schools at that time that had never been charged with a major NCAA infraction. And so, first and foremost, we were going to abide by the rules.
Absolutely.
And not get caught cheating or doing something like that. But it really does drive of a lot of what happens at BYU, including athletics. The story goes that back in the day when Brigham Young called Carl G. Mazur, who was kind of the first big principal to go down and established and work at Brigham Young Academy at the time, he said, "You're not even going to teach the multiplication tables without the Spirit of God." And so, that's kind of been the underlying principle. But, a lot of people may say, well, athletics and religion are incompatible. We tried to make them compatible.
Absolutely.
And we were pretty successful. At the time, when I became athletic director in 1999, I happened to be the boss of Lavelle Edwards, who was the fourth most winningest coach in NCAA history at the time. And he had helped establish the culture, everything at BYU. I mean, he'd been so successful and done it so well. I was really honored to be able to work with him for his last 2 years. He retired in 2000, but learning from him and seeing how he had taken BYU from a team that I think had beat Utah once in 50 years and turned it around and won a national championship and won many, many conference titles and bowl games and really put BYU on the map. And to see how he did that kind of set the blueprint for the entire athletic department.
Absolutely. Did you go to BYU?
I did.
Okay, I didn't know that. So.
Played, if you use the word played very liberally, I played football for 1 year.
I love it.
I was on the team.
You often emphasize culture first. How did you build consistency and value from coaches to support staff to the athletes so everyone brought that all into vision?
Well, when I was athletic director, I came up with a program. I called it SPECS.
Okay.
That's the acronym. When you want to build something, you come up with what they call specifications or specs in the industry, and it's true for building a home, publishing a book, whatever it is. So you try to tell what it is you want the outcome to be and what you want it to look like and what's going to go into it. So I came up with this acronym SPECS, which S stood for, again, spirituality, going back to what, Brigham Young had said. We want athletes to come here and have where their faith in God grows, whether they're members of our church or not, to leave here having more faith in God. That was number one. Number two was P, preparation for life. I was around a lot of athletes, and for many years, I noticed that athletes at that level oftentimes got pampered a lot, they'd been coddled for most of their life, given things, worshipped, adored by the public. And when they graduated from high school, they weren't really prepared for life. They kind of wandered for a couple of years because the spotlight had turned off. They were no longer these celebrities, and they didn't know how to function. So I told our coaches and staff, we have to prepare these young men and women for life and teach them what it means to go out into the world and be successful, and show them how, teach them how. That was really an important part of what we were about. E was education. Obviously, we're here, at a university. We need to help these student athletes graduate with a degree, get an education, because too often in college athletics, and even at BYU and other places, athletes were leaving without a degree. Sometimes they would go years and finally come back and get it, but that wasn't a good situation. So we wanted all of our athletes to have that. The C stands for championships. We wanted every one of our athletes to leave with a championship ring on their finger. We felt like, that was something that they should be part of. And we wanted our program to be good enough that we could do that. In 2001, while I was athletic director, every team we had at BYU, except one, won either the conference championship regular season or the conference championship tournament.
Wow.
And so, that was nice because every one of those athletes got a ring on their finger.
Yeah.
And once you're a champion, you're a champion. And no one can take that away from you. So you do have a higher responsibility at that point. And that's what I wanted our athletes to feel. And then the S at the end on specs was success. We needed to teach them to be successful citizens in society. Once, so that when they left the university and the athletic program, they could go on and become successful parents, successful business leaders, successful citizens, and really make a contribution. So that was kind of what we did to try to promote the culture. That's what we wanted to do. We wanted to have success on the athletic field, championship type success. We wanted to have success in the classroom. We wanted to have success off the field in their personal lives. And we felt if we could do that, we could set the stage for them having a great life, overall.
Absolutely. And I love something like that. I mean, my oldest had that in high school, right? Theirs was family, and each of the letters meant something. But when you invest in these kids, that not just their ability to play for you, but that, like his coaches, making sure he was a decent human being, making sure their grades were up, making sure they knew how to donate and do service. And so I think that that's amazing. I love that. Athletic programs today aren't just about the game. They are major enterprises. We're seeing that everywhere with NIL, everything.
Yeah. Yep.
From your experience, how do fundraising, branding, and administration come together to deliver both athletic success and financial viability?
Well, I'm just going to say it. Athletics today is all about money.
Yep.
College athletics.
What do you think of the NIL? Can I ask you that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's part of it. So what happened is about 3 or 4 years ago, you had this perfect storm. And the storm was that courts made these rulings. Number one, that athletes could be paid and they could profit from their name, image, and likeness. Mm-hmm. And I'm not opposed to that. I think the NCAA had been way, way too strict on what they prohibited. Like, I couldn't even pick up an athlete who was walking home in a rainstorm and offer him a ride home in my car.
Right, crazy.
I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yep.
And then at the same time, a judge ruled that schools couldn't restrict athletes from transferring from one school to the other. There used to be penalties. Yeah, you can transfer, but you have to sit out a year.
Yep.
Those two things right there immediately changed the game. Now, when they talked about NIL initially, the concept was you as an athlete, let's say you're an athlete, you can go out and find a business that wants to use you, pay you to advertise their product or to wear their product, or, you're eligible to go out and profit from your name, image, and likeness. But almost immediately it went from that to boosters just raising money and paying you.
Right.
For really nothing, or just some little thing, like Give us all an autograph and we'll give you $2 million. And so what happened was suddenly schools, it became a bidding war for athletics, for athletes. So, you could, when you went on your recruiting trip, you'd say to the coach, I was just at X and X school and they offered me $400,000. How much are you going to offer me? So it turned in instead of it being profiting from your image and name, it became pay to play.
Right.
I mean, that's really what it was.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem, right? Is that we've now taken the power from one monster and given it to the other side of it,
now,
for sure.
Now they've reined that in a little bit
Mm-hmm.
because, I mean, it was just unsustainable. I mean, athletes were making, well, let's look at A.J. DeBanza at BYU, the number one recruit in the country this last year. BYU went out and reportedly paid him about $4 million to come and play at BYU. BYU would have never, most likely, been able to recruit him without NIL. But he came in, and it wasn't just money. He said, according to him, he loved the fact that BYU had this former NBA coach that, would give him an NBA type experience. But he also has 8-figure deals with, like, Red Bull. He had a $1 million deal in high school with Nike. He signed an $8 million deal or an 8-figure deal with a playing card company recently. The guy's he's 18 years old, and he's making like probably $30-40 million a year, I would guess, at least. And, and he's still a freshman in college, never played a college game yet. But then when you add the transfer portal to that, now what happens is at the end of the season, if you've had a great season, you basically look around and enter the transfer portal, which doesn't necessarily mean you're going to transfer, but then you're available to the highest bidder. Then other schools can contact you and say, yeah, they were paying you $1 million, we'll pay you $2 million. And so it's like unrestricted free agency. And it's really crazy.
It is insane.
But this year, the NCAA has worked with the House, the courts and everything else to come up with this proposal where now schools pay the athletes. And the courts have said you can take up to a certain percentage of your revenue, which is about $20.5 million, and use that pool of money to pay your athletes. And so now schools will pay them directly. That doesn't mean they can't do NIL still, if it's a legitimate NIL deal. So unlike before, if an athlete gets an NIL deal, I think bigger than like $600, it has to go to a clearinghouse like Deloitte, and they will evaluate it to see if it's legitimate and if it's fair market value. If it is, then you can still have that NIL deal, but it's not pay to play anymore. And so schools will have to figure out how they're going to divvy up that money. But you talk about fundraising and how that has all marketing, how that's all affected it. Well, everything has been consumed in college athletics the last 3 years by NIL, and it'll be a while before it all sorts out.
BYU Athletics added significant revenue streams under your leadership.
Mm-hmm.
What strategies did you use to grow booster engagement and enhance brand value at the university?
Probably the thing I remember most was when I became athletic director, we had 3 rows of seats on the floor at in the Marriott Center in the basketball arena. Those were basically managed by the development office at the university, the fundraising team, not athletics, at the university. And so we were at the mercy of them allowing us to put people there, etc. One day I went to a jazz game, and I was sitting up in a loge, a booth upstairs, and Spencer Eccles Sr., big Utah booster, great guy, amazing business person. He came up and he was talking to me, and he said, hey, I have 2 tickets for the floor for the second half. Do you want to go down and sit on them? I said, yeah, absolutely. So he gave me these 2 tickets. I went down. I still remember they were playing the San Antonio Spurs. And I looked at the price tag on those tickets. And I went,
Died.
are
Yeah.
you kidding me? They're getting this much money for courtside seats? I said, I need to take our courtside seats and
Absolutely.
turn them into revenue. And so I went back to the university and I put together a proposal. I went to the administration and I said, you've got like, I can't remember how many seats were there, a couple of hundred, it was maybe not quite that many, but I said, athletics can really turn these into to money. Right now, you're using them for hosting. The university's not making any money. So I put together a proposal, got with the focus group and said, how much money can we charge for these seats? This is what the Jazz are charging for courtside seats. If we gave them a meal before, had a private parking spot out there with their name on it for the game, gave them some swag, and they came back and said, let's ask for $3,500 per seat. Plus they have to belong to the Cougar Club. And I said, okay, you think we can sell those? And they said, yeah, we think so. We sold them all the first year. Today, those same seats on the front row, I think are selling for $20,000 each.
Oh my God.
So, but
that's amazing.
Just when we did that, it increased our basketball revenue by 1/3. Just those seats on the floor.
Isn't that crazy?
And I did the same thing in football. We went over and took a section, the middle section on the east stands where the students used to sit, and I had them completely renovate it. They put in really nice chair seats, wide with leg room, and we did the same thing. People had to pay $1,000 to the Cougar Club, and the seats were $1,000 a piece. And same thing. I think there were like 1,100 seats that were total. And from those seats, it was the equivalent financially of adding an extra home football game.
Wow.
We brought in as much revenue from those seats as we did from an extra football game.
That's amazing.
So
I'm going to hope the Crimson Club is not listening to this episode. I'm like, because I have football tickets for 10 years that have been the same price. So I'm like, please don't.
Yeah,
but
no,
that's amazing, though.
BYU has now, because of the demand for football and basketball tickets, a lot of people can't even get basketball tickets who are donors. They can't even get them now because the demand has been so high.
Absolutely.
And that's both good and bad. But anyway, those were two of the things that I did to try to really generate more revenue. And they're kind of commonplace at all universities now. I mean, everybody's doing that.
That's amazing. After BYU, you took on the role of executive director at the Governor's Office of Economic Development. How did that career shift sharpen your perspective on statewide economic strategy?
They had a great program in place. I replaced Spence Eccles Jr. when I got to GoEd, and the governor had a plan in place. And, I give him a lot of credit because he said from day one, economic development is my number one priority, and he didn't deviate from that. A lot of leaders, they'll say this is their priority, but it isn't really. I used to tell the governor all the time, I said, you can tell a person's priority by looking at their calendar. I mean,
who they're meeting with,
who you're meeting with.
About.
And fortunately, Governor Herbert gave me complete access to his calendar. When we needed him to fly to Silicon Valley to meet with a company, he would go. When we needed him to fly overseas on a trade mission, he would go. When we needed him to meet with the CEO of one of our companies in Utah, he would do it. He was pretty much completely accessible to me. And the fact that he had already established that culture, that's what allowed us in our office to be as successful as we were.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I mean, I think that that's amazing because with Ryan prior to, this podcast, a lot of what we talked about was, just Utah being number one in so many different areas of growth and economic development and small business, et cetera. And so I think that's all from what Herbert, your team, you guys built is now we're seeing all of that come to fruition for sure.
Yeah. And, I can talk a little bit more about that if you want in terms of.
I'd love it.
Yeah. So people used to always ask me, why Utah? Why Utah? Why are you guys number one on all these lists and doing all these things? And, I always had my little spiel. Number one, Utah's secret sauce is collaboration. So we collaborate and we work together, unlike other states. And I had that reaffirmed to me many times by businesses who would come in and say, wow, you people are so different because, you know, the legislature works with the governor, with the chamber. You guys all work together. We don't see that other places. But the other thing is the business friendly environment. Utah's always been a very business friendly place. The legislature has tried to, pass laws that help businesses grow. Governor Herbert used to say, we keep government off your back and out of your wallets. And that appealed a lot to businesses.
Sure.
So businesses started coming to Utah, looking at Utah. And I think you mentioned the entrepreneurial spirit here. That is very unique. I think, again, I had people in other states that would come here, find out what was going on and say, you people are much more entrepreneurial than any place I've ever been. I think part of that is because we have so many who've served missions, and been out. They come back with confidence that they can do things. When I went to Israel on a trade mission, I talked to a lot of the entrepreneurs who had started businesses, and I'd say, why are you so successful? What made you successful? And almost without exception, they said, my time in the military. Because in Israel, they have mandatory conscription. Yep. They all, at age 18, spend time in the military. And they said, I was just some, lost 18-year-old kid, and I got in the military. I was trained with discipline, direction. And when I got out of the military, I had that going for me. And I used that confidence I got to start this business. And I thought, that sounds a lot like Utah. With these young people that go off, they're in a regimented schedule, they're learning other languages, they're doing that, and they come home and they think, hey, I've got the confidence to do this. So I think that I noticed a real similarity between the two. In fact, this is just my opinion, but I thought, how interesting would it be? You can argue both, a lot here and there, if we had mandatory conscription or something like that, where a mandatory service in some sort of a situation where you were in a disciplined environment for a year and you had to do that.
Sure.
I mean, I just think the benefits to our society would be significant because
I couldn't agree more. And I think I am not of the religion in Utah. And I believe 100% that because I've seen it growing up my whole life, like they either go in the military or go on a mission, and you know what I mean? That helps them grow up, and then they come back and they're not spending my money for 2 years at college, having fun for the first little bit,
Yeah. Well, it certainly changed my life. And I think that's one of the reasons that Utah is so entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
But you combine all those things, business friendly environment, our education. We have great education system. We used to have a real advantage with lower cost housing.
Yeah.
That's a thing of the past.
Yeah.
I used to tell people down in California, I'd say to them, you can sell your 3-bedroom home here and go build a mansion at the mouth of Little Cottonwood Canyon. But that's long gone, And then we call it the Utah discount with labor. They were paying 6 figures plus down in California, and they'd come up to Utah and they would offer people, 75, 80,000. And up here, we thought that was a lot of money. Now that's pretty much gone too now, our wages.
Absolutely.
But at the time when I came into GoEd, we had those things going for us. And we would fly down to California and meet with these top companies. And we would say to them, look, I know you want to keep an address in Silicon Valley. That's where you want your corporate address to be. But don't grow here. It's too expensive to grow here.
Absolutely.
Bring all your new jobs to Utah. And a lot of them did it. I remember going to meet with Snapchat.
Yeah.
And we met with Snapchat, and they had, I want to say, 70-ish of their top engineers who were averaging, I think it was 350,000 a year, and they moved them all to Utah.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know
They
that.
came to Utah.
Wow.
A couple of them, their chief engineers, several of them had lived here in Utah, and they wanted to come back. So we gave them an incentive, and they came back, but, making huge money, especially for Utah. But, those were the type of things that we did to try to bring high-paying jobs back to the state.
That's amazing. How can cities, universities, and economic leaders work together to maximize the benefits of sports infrastructure and events for their communities?
Well, they have to work together. There's a lot of debate about this, but when a community wants to bring in a Major League Baseball team, they have to build a facility, right? And a lot of times that requires a public-private partnership.
Yeah.
And the public has to pay a little bit, and a lot of people are concerned about that. But, these sports brands bring so much prestige to a city and help the city's brand so much. I mean, imagine what Green Bay, Wisconsin would be like without the Packers, the Green Bay Packers.
Right.
I mean, you think of Green Bay, you think of the Packers. That's almost their brand, right?
Yep.
Frozen tundra, Green Bay Packers. And now, if you're willing to make that investment, because a lot of these owners are not willing to spend $2 billion on a new stadium or $1.5 billion, but they're willing to partner with the cities, and the cities have to decide if they want to do that. Some say no, some say yes, and I'm not going to debate whether that should always be the case. But if you want to take advantage of the sports economy that is really out there now and growing, the community has to make some sort of investment with the partner.
Absolutely. Here's an athletics, business, or government that are going to be listening. What are 3 takeaways from your journey that blend culture, strategy, and community engagement?
Relationships. I mean, it's all about relationships. Harvard did a longitudinal study. I think it was like in 1938. They identified the freshman class, and they followed them through their whole lives, interviewed them every year with all these questions about everything in their lives. And at the end, they published a book. And the guy who published the book, he said, the bottom line is relationships are most important, period. After all of that studying, the thing that came down to it was relationships matter most. And I think the same thing in organizations. When we interact with people, with clients, with employees.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, when your career is over and you're retired like I am, it's those relationships that you have left that you can remember, that you can still call on people, and that's really important. And then, I think that the other thing is just to always be a person of integrity that people can trust. I think, when people trust you, then everything is easier. So I think those are just 3 things that.
When I think when they mistaken that too is like when you say integrity and trust, it's that you mean what you say and you say what you mean,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that may not always be what people want to hear, but they know that if you're saying it, that.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Yeah, I think people, we've all been around people who are just brutally honest, and sometimes we don't like it, but I have to respect those people. Because they tell you exactly what they think, and they don't sugarcoat it. They hear you what you need to hear, and you're going, okay, well, I didn't like that, but thank you very much.
Appreciate your honesty. Given your experience across such different but connected worlds, what mindset do you think leaders need to develop to consistently adapt and drive results?
Well, I think number 1, they need to be willing to listen. And listening includes evaluating data, gathering and evaluating data. We have so much data available in this day and age, and just being willing to listen to others and find out what's really happening. Where's the industry going? I know at LSI, you're constantly dealing with change and things that
Yeah.
are happening, and by listening and learning and just paying attention to what's going on around you, you can make the decisions that you need to pivot. And if you don't, status quo is never a good strategy for a business, right?
Yeah.
It's going to result in your business eventually dying. So I think listening to others. I love the idea of surrounding yourself with people smarter than you. It's
Yeah.
I hired Tom Holmo, who replaced me as athletic director, did a fantastic job. I hired Brian Santiago, who's now the athletic director at BYU. Hire good people who are going to give you, again, good advice, and then listen to them. That was Lavelle Edwards' secret, and he admitted it. I just surrounded myself with good people, let them do their job, and then I was kind of like the CEO, but I kept my hands off and let them do their job, and he won a ton of games.
Yep. I love that. I think those are some of the best things I've ever heard. And I had a mentor that was in sales and growth. And typically when you think of salesmen, you're like, they talk fast and they're loud and and I think his were the most successful. And what he constantly told the people around him and myself was like, you want to be the one talking the least amount in in a meeting with clients. And anyways, I think that's great. And in all aspects of life, right? That you're listening and not just waiting for your turn to talk.
Yeah.
So. Val, thank you for sharing your insights and stories from championship seasons to economic strategy to authorship. And I do want you to plug your latest book. Can you tell them all the name of your book and where they can find it?
Well, I wrote a year ago. I wrote a book, my memoirs about BYU athletics. It's called Out of the Blue: An Insider's Look at the Rise of BYU Athletics. I worked there for 24 years I started playing in 75, but I worked from 1980, Jim McMahon's year, the Miracle Bowl, up to 2004. So they were often called the glory years of BYU athletics. And so my book is a look at my journey through that time, from starting out as the first marketing coordinator that they hired when they expanded the stadium to Lavelle, his retirement, and beyond. So I think BYU fans will enjoy it, and they can get it on Amazon. Okay. Some of the bookstores locally have it. So
we'll link it here, and Val's on our LSI board, so we all got copies of it before anyone else. So I think it's great. It's a great book. So we'll link it on here so that they can get to it. But Val, thanks. Appreciate you coming by today.
Sarah, it's always great. Thank you for having me, and thanks for letting me be involved at LSI. I love it.
Thank you.